Everybody, Meg Ruler, 31 back here for FSI DFS. I want to talk about EuroLeague basketball here. Played for like the last 5 or 6 years since it came out. It's actually what got me into FSI. Gator Guy had a really good program. I didn't know much about it. Started subscribing and learned a lot from him, and then just started building my own projections and stuff for it. And they actually brought me on staff to lead it here for a couple of seasons. But after the pandemic last year, just the prize pools evaporated. A lot of companies that covered it before just stopped covering it. So just kind of made the decision this year they're not going to do the full-fledged projections, and it's just way too hard to keep up on, especially with all the cancellations they had last year with COVID and things like that. But what I did figure I'd do is my evening plans got canceled tonight, so I had some extra time. So I'm going to break down the 4-game slate for Thursday. I'm going to see tomorrow if I have some time, if DK gets some information out in time to break down Fridays, just to kind of give you guys a preview of the season and what EuroLeague is, and just kind of point you in the right direction, because I did make the decision not to go full force for it this year. And so we'll still have a chat room in the FSI Discord if people want to talk about it, ask some questions, and I'll post my thoughts on the games I'm playing. But the thing about EuroLeague basketball is it's not a set it and forget it sport. It's something that you have to really pay attention to, because you can study your butt off the night before and you only get like pricing like maybe not too far before a slate. So there's 18 teams in EuroLeague, and most of the time they play on Thursdays and Fridays, and they usually split it 4-5 or 5-4, whatever. But sometimes they'll split it like 7-2, sometimes they'll split it 6-3. It gets kind of weird. They throw in double weeks sometimes, and with that, then you have like games all over the place. And if you have a game the slate before, you don't get the next day's pricing information until like 1, 2, 3 in the afternoon. So you have really limited time to look it over and break it down for the next day. And EuroLeague is a little bit different than NBA basketball. You have 40-minute games, and they're broken down into 10-minute periods instead of 12. So losing those 8 minutes really does make a difference. So you really want to try to get starters. And here's the thing: these teams really don't announce their starters. And you know how bad the NBA is. I mean, this is just so much worse. And what EuroLeague is it's actually like an all-star league. And it's kind of goofy. It's not like the Champions League, because every team doesn't qualify. Some of them like have long-term contracts, and then other like rotate in and out. So it's just too goofy to explain how it works. So basically it's 18 teams. There's some of the best teams in Europe, and you have some like real super all-star teams here, especially when you look at like the Moscow team, the Spanish teams, and then you have some other like littler teams that are just, they're like the little engine that could. They're there to David versus Goliath, fight the big guys, and sometimes they do quite well. But most years when it comes to the playoffs and to the Final Four, it's mostly the same blue blood teams over and over and over again. So, but those teams are very deep too, so it's very hard to play them in DFS. So you might look at their lineup at the game before, and then they might throw out something completely different in the next game. They also play in domestic leagues. So think kind of, if you're a soccer fan, you have the Champions League, but then like Liverpool would also play in the Premier League, or Bayern Munich would also play in the Bundesliga. So some of them also play in domestic leagues. So you look, back earlier in the week and see who started in domestic league, and maybe that will give you a gauge as to who's going to start for EuroLeague play. But some countries have some weird rules. So like in Turkey, in the Turkish league, you can only play like 2 or 3 foreign-born players. The rest all have to be from Turkey. So they have almost a completely different roster with a couple of the people that carry over. So some of them, domestic leagues, really don't do anything for you. So it just is a mess. So when do lineups come out? They come out, if you're lucky, 5 minutes before the lock of every single game. You go to the EuroLeague website, you keep on hitting refresh on the game box score until it pops up. And sometimes you'll see this little orange ball or box that kind of like bops around the top of the screen. We call it the orange block of death, because it does absolutely nothing but frustrate you. And sometimes the game will lock and then all of a sudden, poof, the lineup comes up. And you have to do that sometimes for every single. Now, some of the teams are really good on their Twitter account. You might get the lineup like maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes beforehand. So it's not as much of a scramble. But there's a lot of surprises where sometimes guys are just completely left off the roster. Or, if a guy's questionable, you're not going to know if he's in or out. So you really want to try to pick the most surest things for these lineups, because if you can't be there before the lock of each of the 4 games, and sometimes on these like big, huge slates where you have 7 games, you can have 4 games locking at the same time or within like 5 minutes of each other. And it's just almost impossible to try to keep up. So I'm just going to look at the teams. I'm going to tell you who I think their projected starters are. Just looking at like last year, some of them had preseason, some played tournaments, just my best educated guess. So this isn't 100% because, again, tomorrow when these lineups come out, they could be something completely different. So I'm just going to run through the teams and give you some of my thoughts on each one of them and their situation for their play tomorrow. And then at the end, I will give you some of my core guys that I'm going to be rostering in the cheaper range that's going to help you get the studs in that you want. So we're going to start with a newly promoted team to the league here, which is Monaco. So Monaco actually picks up Mike James, and picture Mike James as, I don't know, maybe Isaiah Thomas, or the way Ben Simmons is acting, or maybe Kyrie Irving, where he's a very, very talented player. He's more like kind of in the mode of like Allen Iverson, where he's never met a shot he didn't like. He did actually, he had a really good gig with Russia last year and got in the fight with the coach, got benched quite a few times, got kicked off the team, actually ended up on the Brooklyn Nets for the end of their like season there. I don't think he played too much in the playoffs, but now he's back in Monaco, where he should be the star of the team. He's priced up. He's one of the most expensive players, and he can drop a 50 or 60 burger, or he can completely go cold. So, and the thing is like, will he be the starter? And that's the thing too, is there's many times where he didn't start, but the starter in front of him would play like 5 minutes, and James would come in, play the rest of the game, and then throw up, definitely make value. So in I know in NBA we're looking for probably like about 10x value for it's a pretty decent amount. These guys don't score that many points, and because of the limited minutes and the deep teams, and just they only get 5 fouls too. So if they get in foul trouble, then if they pick up 2 fouls early on, then they're probably going to sit most of the first half, which is super frustrating also. So I usually look for like 2.5 to 3x for scoring for when I select a player. So James is there. It looks like Rob Gray is going to be the other guard that's going to start across from him. Will Thomas and Danilo and Jusic. I'll try my best to pronounce these players for you guys. So they look like who the starters are going to be here. And then Donatas Montezuma is, I believe, is going to be the center. Monaco actually is favored here. It's about a 4.5 spread. It's one of the highest totals on the slate. It looks like they could probably put up 84 points because they're up against Panathinaikos, who wasn't the greatest defensive team last season. Now, of course, the players have changed and situations and things have changed, so we'll have to see what happens there. But you do have some decent scores here, so I think I'm gonna maybe consider, James is one of my studs in cash. I don't think I'm really going to take anybody else from this one. And if you're looking at my color codes here, the green are guys that I think I'm projecting to start. The B are going to be guys that come off the bench that could be valuable and get some decent minutes. The gray R's are guys that I'm probably not going to consider. Again, I don't know what their complete role is. I'm just going by the best information I can. And the guys in the gray R, I'm just kind of not interested in because I don't know enough about them to be confident to play them week one. I mean, one of the like this Paris Lee here, know nothing about him. He could come out and completely break the slate. He could put up 70 points. Don't know. But what I want to try to do for week one is I want to try to go with known commodity. So I know Mike James. Rob Gray, I don't know much about him other than he did play for the University of Houston. And there wasn't a ton of preseason information. Will Thomas has been around in the league. He's definitely last year, I think he played for Valencia. He's one who's decent, but he's one also that kind of would sometimes disappear in games. He'd have a really good game, and then like what happened to Will Thomas, and I don't know if it was foul trouble or what, but if you look at most of his box scores from last year, you're they're somewhere in the high teens to the 20s. So I mean, that's okay for the price, kind of. I do also will apologize at this point too. This video gets a little bit choppy. We did have to turn on our heat in our house because it got a little bit cold tonight. So really dried out my sinuses. It's caused me to cough a little bit. So try not to do that on video. So if you see it look like the video just got cut and edited, that's probably because I paused it quick to take a quick drink or cough break. So anyways, so I think, Will Thomas is in the conversation. Some of these other guys, if they start, I think, are worth a look. And it's the first game, so we should know, hopefully get the lineups. Last year, the first game of the season, we didn't get the lineups so after lock, which was super frustrating. So these are some of the guys I consider. I think I might stack this game because it has the highest total, and I think they have the highest implied total as a team. So I might try to figure out who the 5 starters are, stack them, and then throw in a 6th guy that just to finish off my lineup. Next up, we have Milan, who actually I think has one of the lower totals on the slate. Let's see here. No, Bayern does. So this game has a 4.5 point spread. It has a 62.5. So it's really close to the same pace and the same total as the first game that is going to be between Monaco and Panathinaikos. So Monaco is a decent mid-range team. I'm trying to think in the NBA who to kind of compare them to. It's like a team that does well, but they're just like maybe a step below being elite. So maybe trying to think. It's just like in the NBA, there's just like so much gap sometimes between maybe call them like the Clippers, because they're not like a super elite team, but they're solid and usually do pretty well each season. So they bring back a lot of their players from last year, which is good. It's going to give them some continuity to work with. Here, I'm just seeing if I can find the ins and outs of who they lost and who they transferred. The starters, I think, are pretty much solid here. They did play a couple preseason games, and I was pretty good with who they're playing. So I'm pretty sure like Delaney is going to start. Shields is he's a very solid forward. He's more kind of like a 3. He can get some assists, some rebounds, score some points. Datome, same thing. Like his price here, because if he starts, like he has a lot of potential. He can put up like 20 points. So he seems to be a little bit underpriced. Mealy and Hines are solid. Probably not too much on Hines. There's some times where he would just would underwhelm. You'd look for like the 20-point game and get like 15 from him. So Mid and the other thing that kind of scares me a little bit about this front court is Konstantin Medolagu here. He played for, I think, Panathinaikos, one of the Greek teams last year, and he was could be dominant at times, so it might take a little bit away. Jereen Grant, I think he was on the Knicks at one point. I think he played at Notre Dame. I think he's Jeremy Grant's brother, if I'm not correct. So he's a decent player, and 59 is not a bad price here for someone off the bench. But this is a weird situation too, because what they usually do is they usually play like one guard. Shields kind of plays guard. He's more like probably a 3, but kind of fills in as a 2. So it's almost like sometimes like 4 forwards and one guard. But sometimes one of these forwards will sit, and then Sergio Rodriguez will come in off the bench, and he is one that just goes out there like kind of like the Lou Williams role of a couple of years ago, where he just come off the bench and just come right into the game and take over. Some like Mike James, you see that a lot. When we get to FS pretty soon too, like you had 2 stud guards, and sometimes only one of them would start, but then the other one would come in soon after, like the first officials timeout, and then just kind of play the rest of the game. So this EuroLeague is just like really, really goofy with rotations and stuff. So not in love with anybody on this team other than, like I said, they are pretty solid. Its home looks a little bit underpriced here. So at 57, I think he's someone that I would potentially look at. Troy Daniels is out for the game, so don't play him. And like I said, I don't have Sergio as starting, but he very well could start. So just have to keep an eye on that. Next up, we have Bayern Munich. They have the lowest point total in the game. They've got a bunch of guys out still, which does make this kind of a good situation. There were many situations with COVID and with injuries last year. Like, they don't have to have a certain amount of teams. Some of these rosters are huge, like the Spanish teams, and some of these teams can't afford to have that many players. So they might only play like 7 or 8, and that's what you really want to find. I think it was Baskonia a couple of years ago. Most of their guys were averaging like 35, 36 minutes, and you only had a few guys coming off the bench playing like 10 minutes or less, filling in if they didn't have any foul trouble. So it was definitely a good situation. Sean Thomas, it's a very good forward, very solid player. Hilliard played for Moscow a couple years ago. Maybe he was still there last year. He's decent also, but hot and cold. There are games where he would be absolutely fire, and then there are games where he would not, be super good. So Walden's questionable. He should be the starting point guard. If he's not in, then Cisco might get the start. So that's not a bad price for a starting guard at 6,500. But again, remember, they have like kind of the lowest total here. So not super interested in many pieces here. Bab's been okay. If you want to stack this game, Hunter is questionable also. This is a revenge game for him. He played for Maccabi last couple of seasons, so there might be some incentive there. So pretty much just looking at here, I think Deshaun Thomas would be the one that I would like the most out of the players here. And if you need a cheap guard, both of pretty much any of the guards here they're playing, if they start, might be a good fill-in for you in cash if needed. Next up, we come to Russia, to Sheska. They, again, made some moves over the season. They got rid of James. They brought in Gragonas from, I think he's from Zalgiris, I believe it was. And they brought Shved in because Shved's team got, they had a horrible season. I mean, it was a decent team, and actually a couple years ago they were like in contention. It was Kimchi, and they had a good roster last year, but COVID hit, injuries hit, and they just went on like a losing streak, and they just could not turn it around. So they did not win enough games to qualify to come back. So Shved, being a free agent, got picked up with Moscow here, and he's the highest priced player, I believe, on the slate, and he's pretty much the GOAT of EuroLeague basketball. He is like the best player. I don't know how, if he's 100% fit. He struggled with some injuries last year. Don't know what happened in the off season, if he's okay or not. But if he's on, he's on. He just scores a ton of points. He's a very good free throw shooter. He does everything in all aspects of the game. 5-tool player. I mean, I don't think he gets a ton of blocks, but he definitely fills up a box score and is definitely worth his price tag if he's on. Lundenberg actually started last year a couple times when Moscow had a ton of injuries in the guard position, and they were able to work him in. He had some decent games for that, but I don't think I don't know how to take him at 8K. I mean, he was almost average 20 points, but there's some games where he was really hot. So he's interesting at that price point. Gragonas, like I said, is solid. So it looks like they're kind of an opposite thing here, where we saw like the last team. They're going to probably play 3 guards and a couple of forwards, but the forwards are really deep. Milutinov, I think he hurt his elbow. He was out of the season early. Shingela was very strong with Baskonia. I thought he'd be a great addition here. He had some monster games, but then he had some duds too. And they're deep here in the front court because you have Bolenboy, Voigtman, and Kurbanov. Kurbanov, I would not play at all, even if he starts. Like, he's one that might play like 5 minutes and put up like 9 points total. And then, some of the other guys come in and play most of the rest of the game. Will Clyburn is not scheduled as starting, but he's an absolute stud too. And that's the problem with this team. It's so deep, and there's so many weapons that it's hard to know, where it will go or who's going to dominate. Or what's going to happen here. And you got a couple of 10K guys and 11K guys. So I definitely make sure before I played them, especially in cash, that they're starting. I wouldn't, they have a nice total here, but I wouldn't, consider playing them if they are not starting, because you don't know like what the role is going to be off the bench. So this is a team that we might need to wait and see a couple of weeks to see like how the usage is and what happens with the players. But again, like I said, it's a small slate, and even in the $10 GPP, if you're going for the 5K first place prize, I think you have like 40 entries or whatever. If you've got the bankroll and the time, then just stack every team's starters and see what happens. But here, if you want to get a little bit different, here's, to try to take some of these tournaments down. If you find the right guy off the bench, like a Clyburn not starting, could come in and make a huge difference, especially, like I said, if Kurbanov gets the start there. Okay, moving on to the next team. We're halfway done here. Ephesus. So 2 years ago, Shane Larkin was, before COVID shut down, and Ephesus was on fire, and Shane Larkin was the best player in the league by far. And then Mikic kind of disappeared. The last year, Larkin kind of disappeared, and Mikic took over and won the MVP. So these two guys are absolute studs at guards. The problem is with this team is you never know which one is going to have the day. And it's so frustrating because it seems like you pick one and you commit to it and you pick the wrong one. Then you have Simon too, who is the third guard, or kind of like the small forward there, who will go out and sometimes he will like chuck up a bunch of threes and put up a ton of points, and other times he'll fade away and do absolutely nothing. And sometimes they start Baberos here, who we call Boob, affectionately, his nickname, and sometimes he'll start the game and play most of the game, and maybe they're resting these guys because, again, sometimes later on in the season, when you have so many games in such a short, they're playing like domestic game, and then they have 2 EuroLeague games and then another domestic game, they're rotating these players. He'll start and maybe Larkin or Mikic won't even play, or play very limited. So it's just so hard to nail this. So you've got some really good options here. The pricing on him is phenomenal. Like Larkin at 9.6, if he comes out and is like 2019 Larkin, and Mikic comes out and he's 2019 Mikic, then this is definitely a great bargain, and this is going to be paying too much. Front court, I lost a couple pieces, but there's still, Mormon, Dunstan. I don't know which one of those two is going to start with Singleton. Maybe Singleton won't. Maybe these two will. It could be anything. Keep an eye. If Felipe Petrusave starts, I've heard nothing but good things about him, and some of the commentary and podcasts that I've listened to. I think he's a very talented young player. I think there's a lot of depth in front of him, but maybe they'll kick the tires and give him some run and see what's going on. The only problem is they're up against Real Madrid, who is a very, very strong defensive team. They have a very, very stout front court, which that kind of might dampen the guards too, because these guys like to slash and drive, and they can pack it into lanes. So that might be another reason to kind of wait and see on these guys. But I think, if you get them right, then you're going to do very, very well. It's just hard to tell. Okay, I think my favorite team tomorrow is going to be Maccabi. I believe they had a COVID outbreak in late August, early September, and they really didn't get a chance to get together and play a ton. They did enter in the Israel Cup, and they finished that up just a couple of weeks ago. They won, actually a couple of days ago, they won it. So I've got a kind of a sense of their rotation and what they might do, and some players that seem to be underpriced here. And my favorite player of the whole slate is here. So this team has been strong the last couple of years. They've had a couple of injuries, a lot of turnover. Like Caspi was on the team, former NBA player. He retired. Hunter, like I said, went to Bayern Munich. Tyler Dorsey was on the team also. He went to Olympiacos. Bryant was on the team. He is on the Milwaukee Bucks roster currently for camp. So like Will Beckon used to be with all these guards, and again they got so saturated. Sometimes there was injuries, and it was great because if there's only like two of them, then they get a ton of minutes and they do well. But if all four of them were there, then you would never know who to play or who to start, and everything got watered down. And it was kind of like the situation we just talked about with Ephesus, that you wouldn't know. Zeusman was there also. But now they've brought in some really good players. So Will Beckon's still here, like that price. And I like their total. I know that this game has the lowest total, but I think it's just because of the Bayern part of it. I really think that Maccabi is going to go out there and put up a bunch of points. I believe they're at home also. They play very well there. Keenan Adams, they've added on. He played basketball at Texas Tech, so he's had some college experience. Not a bad price for a guard there. Nunley, I think he's really underpriced. He played for the New Orleans Pelicans. He's played in EuroLeague before for, I believe it was Fenerbahce. He is a good scorer. He's very underpriced there. Jalen Reynolds could be the steal of the slate also. He is 89. This guy was a monster last year. He was putting up, he played for Bayern Munich, and he had some games that were in like the high 20s and the 30s, and he's not even 9K here. His average was 25 points per game last year. I think especially, with Zizic is out, and Conan and Calerio might get some run here. And I do know they did bring in Lescourt, but I don't know if he'll be eligible and have his paperwork filed to be able to play in time for this game, because there's a lot that has to go on now with vaccinations and quarantine and everything for going from country to country for COVID. I think that Jalen Reynolds can have an absolute monster game at 89. But the guy that I'm looking at the closest here, and I think I'm going to play him whether he starts or not, is this Roman Sirkin. What an Israeli Cup he had. He started a couple of games, but even the games off the bench, the guy was having like 13 or 14 points. He was having like 5 or 6 boards, which in EuroLeague is decent. It's very, very, very a triple double is like a unicorn. Chevette just had a couple, maybe Thales every so often, but you do not see triple doubles. Double doubles are super rare also. So you don't see many guys getting 10 assists or 10 points or 10 rebounds and 10 points. So 5 or 6 rebounds is actually excellent. And he has, I think every single game he had at least one block, and it all adds up. So at 3,400, he really doesn't need to do much. He's almost minimum price. So I'm going to play a lot of him tomorrow in cash. He is my absolute favorite value play on the slate, just seeing what he has done. If he starts, I don't know what I'm going to do. I might have a heart attack because I'm just be so excited. But even if he doesn't, I think he is a very, very good play because this guy's questionable. Zizic is out. Like I said, I know they brought Les Gordon, but I don't know if he's going to play. So he's the only one that's going to be there to back up Reynolds. And he did really, really well when it came to playing with them for this Israeli Cup. So like I said, Will Becken I really like, Nunnally I really like, Reynolds I really like, Williams I think you can make a case for. I think he's pretty cheap, but he was one that kind of would fade away every so often in games last year. So I'm not super excited. And you might see Angelo start, you might see Jake Cohen start. If you do, I wouldn't play them. They're not going to play that long. Oz Blazer too. He pops up for a start every so often, but he's going to fade away. It's going to be Reynolds, going to be Nunnally, and I think it's going to be Sorkin and Will Becken is going to carry this team. Keenan Evans, don't know a ton about him, but at that price, it is worth a dart. Next up, we have Panathinaikos. Not really interested in much of this team. Ioannis Pepperatru was decent last year, had some good games. Jonas did. Then we had Mitru in here. It just seemed like they kind of rotated who would have a good game and who wouldn't. Pricing is okay here. I mean, sometimes I got up in the 10Ks. It's really ridiculous. So at 8v5 and 88 with the potential of 20 DK points, I'm okay with that. Nedovic, he's a very good guard, but he got hurt a lot last year, and I think he hurt his neck and couldn't finish the season. St. Ruis, okay also, but they only have 80 points here. I don't really know much about the team they're facing because it's the Mike James team, and Mike James is definitely not a defensive stalwart by any means, so not sure like how Monaco plays like with pace or defense, so not super interested here. Ocario White might be one to look at too. He had a decent, I think he played college basketball in America. Where did he come from? And he was really good in the next league down, which was the Euro Cup, not the EuroLeague. Played really well in that tournament last year. So definitely someone to look at. He played for Florida State. So at 6,100, definitely one that I'm looking at tomorrow on this team. The rest of the team, I think if you want to get the starters in, I think there's some potential with these guys, but I'm not super interested. And that finally brings us to Real Madrid, the Spanish team. Like I said, it's a complete headache. Abalde's out. Some of their other big guys are out still with injuries they had last year. But I don't know who's going to start with guard. It looks like they're probably going to go with William Gross, who's actually a larger guard. But they could, Lul is like a EuroLeague legend that's been around for ever, and still like a former MVP, just kind of there. Herzl is a younger guy that could come in and also play. Alocine, they tried him last year when they had so many injuries and didn't know what to do at point guard after Campagno left and went to Denver from this team, but he just didn't work out. Now he's got a year under his belt. Maybe he'll develop into something, but just looking at some of the preseason games, he really hasn't gotten much run. It looks like they're all in on William Gross here. Maybe a little bit Herzl, but it looks like Hanga, I think, will be playing like a 2, or it'll kind of be a situation where it's like one guard and like bigs. Yabusele, they brought in, I think he's probably one of their best signings. He and Poirier, they're definitely, I think this team might have had one of the best off seasons, like bringing in new, fresh guys to go with some already well-established guys that they had. So pretty exciting to see some of these guys come in here. Walter Treveas, he's an absolute monster and good too. And with some of the other guys not here anymore, I think that he definitely could make sense. Ephesus has some decent big men, but they don't super scare me. So again, this is a deep team and there's a lot of ways they can go. But if you see like Cosser or Jeffrey Taylor starting or Rudy Fernandez, I'm not interested in those guys. Those guys only play like a handful of minutes and then usually take a backseat to some of these other guys. So the ones I'm interested here would be Yabusele, would be Treveras, and then maybe take a shot on Nigel Williams-Gross. So that's all the teams. So let me just quickly make this a little bit bigger for you. Look at guards again. And like I said, my core lineup I'm going to start with is I'm going to build with I'm going to take Reynolds, Sorkin, and probably Will Becken from Maccabi. I'm going to start with those guys and probably put White in from Panathinaikos. Then I'm just going to figure out like who I want from there, from stud wife, because that leaves things open for me to play Chevette if I want to play James if I want to play Mikic if I want to play a stud forward if I want to, which would be like Tavares and Martinov. I probably won't do Clyburn there, but there's so many decent plays to put in there just by going with those ones. And you know, if you don't like Will Becken, you think that's too much Maccabi, then there should be enough. If you want to go a little bit more balanced, to go like, you know, Larkin and Nedovic. So just looking through the starters here, you know, pretty much lots of potential with these guys here. I would kind of avoid like some of these guys that are probably not starting. Then down in the forward range, like I said, the cheap ones I'm looking at here would be Sorkin or Philippe Petrus. Sorkin I'll play if he doesn't start. This guy, if he starts, I think is definitely a decent play. And for like value guards, Hilliard, if he starts at 57, is decent. Evans, again, really like Maccabi. I think they're my favorite one. So hopefully that helped you a little bit. And as you can see, my Twitter handles here at MegaRuler31. I'll put in the comments below how to get into join our FSI Discord, because the EuroLeague room will be for you there. And again, I'm not going to be posting cores and content like every single slate. You know, if I'm playing, I'll try to throw some stuff out there. But you know, if you're playing throughout the season and have some questions, and I'm probably going to keep up on it and try to play as much as I can. It's just the pressure of trying to play every single slate and being there for every single lock, especially in some of these double weeks, is just very hard. So appreciate you watching. Hopefully this kind of helps you a little bit with like some of the players and who they are and who the teams are. And like I said, if you have any follow-up questions, put them below, or you know, reach out to me on Twitter. We can talk via DM, and you know, I can answer your questions as much as I can. I will be playing the slate tomorrow. I'll be playing the slate on Friday, and then after that we'll just have to see how it goes. Hopefully they keep some nice pools and stuff and it doesn't completely shrink away. I'm actually kind of shocked. Like I said, the DK brought it back this year after how much the pools shrunk last year. So again, I'm MegaRuler31. Check me out on Twitter, leave some comments below, subscribe to our channel, like this video if you think you can help get out there. If you know, if I get a couple hundred views on this, and it seems like, you know, every so often dropping a EuroLeague video is going to be something worthwhile, and well viewed, then I'll continue to consider to do that. So again, appreciate you watching, and good luck in your contest tomorrow.